time on Landmarks, we take a virtual 3D trip into the past. Journey to a New York icon. Witness a birthplace of revolution. And visit a landmark where size doesn't matter. But first, for almost 5 centuries, the Forbidden City in the centre of Beijing served as the home of the emperor and his household. It was the ceremonial and political centre of Chinese government, and like many of its type, had its share of intrigue. Built in the early 1400s, it is a labyrinthine complex of nearly 1,000 buildings and 9,000 rooms. Over 5 centuries, it was home to 24 emperors, their families, and often a huge entourage. In 1987, UNESCO listed the Forbidden City as a World Cultural Heritage Site. Now the mysterious city is undergoing one of its biggest ever restorations. The Forbidden City has benefited greatly from Beijing hosting the 2008 Olympic Games. The multi-million-dollar 10-year restoration program is a joint initiative of the Palace Museum and the World Monuments Fund. It is largely a United States-Chinese cultural initiative. Among the priorities is restoration of the Qianlong Garden. The private garden of the Qing Emperor Qianlong has never been fully opened to the public and remains relatively untouched since imperial times.
Qianlong Garden will not only restore architectural and physical integrity to the garden in its buildings and interiors, gardens, rockeries, and plantings, but will also rehabilitate and modernize the infrastructure of the garden and provide new heating, drainage, and electricity, which are essential if the buildings are going to survive and be accessible to the public, as they never have been in the past.
This is by far the biggest restoration the building has undergone in centuries. 1,400 workers and engineers are concentrated on the crumbling imperial residence. The restoration work previously done on the Forbidden City was all in order to protect or save the structure. For example, if part of the palace was broken or had some water damage, then we would repair it. But this time, we are actively initiating renovation on a large scale. This is the first time in 100 years work has been done on this scale. The Deputy Director of the Palace Museum, Jin Honghui, said the cooperation between the US and China would become a blueprint for similar projects in the future. The American side uses technology more to analyse the components of the ancient materials and skills, why they did it in a certain way, and what the advantages of it are. That's what we learned the most from our colleagues outside China. But a technological approach is at odds with the attitudes in many corners of the Forbidden City. Since 1924, it has been under the charge of the Palace Museum, whose extensive collection of artwork and artefacts were built upon the imperial collections of the Ming and Qing dynasties. For restoration work, the old-fashioned skills of touch still have the upper hand, according to one artisan. There have been conflicts and problems in our cooperation, but the key thing is how we best deal with it. Our American colleagues are more technically advanced. We rely much more on traditional craftsman skill. They are more comfortable with machines, but machines are good when it comes to examining. For reconstructing paintings like this, we still have to use craftsman skill. The benefits of such an approach will be there for all to see when the restoration is completed and the Forbidden City reveals its secrets to an eagerly waiting world. Coming up, the 3D Egypt Library. Examining the past still requires great patience, skill, and observation if it is to be carried out successfully. Much of the process still needs to be carried out by hand, but recent advances in new technology have meant the rewards for each new discovery are even greater. New tools have not only made the scientist's job easier, but they also enhance our understanding and enjoyment of the archaeologist's hard work. Not only do we know more about the way people lived and the buildings they lived in, we can now simulate being in them. Fantastic three-dimensional technology has become a common way of interacting with the great landmarks of the past. At the Alexandria Library in Egypt, they've taken the concept a step further. The building itself is an architectural marvel on the Mediterranean coast. Their newest project is VISTA, which means Virtual Immersive Science and Technology Applications. It is a walk-in virtual reality system that uses a cluster of PCs, 4 projectors and 4 screens to create three-dimensional models and environments. To use VISTA, the user must remove their shoes and step into a 10 by 10 screen on the floor. 3 additional screens make up the walls of the virtual system. The user dons the 3D glasses and the images on the screen take on the appearance of a floating object. A handheld remote allows the user to manipulate the virtual objects and move through the virtual environment. The simulations have a very practical application. Architects can walk inside their designs before they are built.
We saw with the architectural example, people who design buildings usually can see it using usual screens. However, when feeling inside the building, they get better feelings about the dimensions.
And the software is being used across a range of disciplines. There are even several medical applications.
So this system is useful for a variety of domains, like, for example, doctors to visualize details inside the human body, or for genetics as to construct some sequences, or for even engineering, as we saw with the engine example, as to make drawings or update them or have things attached to each other in some way.
One of the screens is movable and can either create a cube or a large L screen that can be viewed by larger audiences. This simulation is a virtual construction of the Santa Maria Maggiore Cathedral in Rome. It allows the user to walk in between columns and even fly several feet above the ground to inspect the ceiling. A sensor on one of the 3D glasses helps the user interact with the 3D model. The library has implemented virtual technologies in other areas of the complex. Casual visitors have access to electronic copies of rare manuscripts and books, an extensive media archive, the Antiquities Museum and the Planetarium. Visitors are given a Palm Pilot that demonstrates how some of the antiquities were used in ancient times. The Palm Pilot keeps track of what items were visited, and a detailed description of the tour can be printed or sent by email upon leaving the museum. The facility is the first of its kind in the Middle East and Africa, and is hoped the library will attract more research and development to Egypt.
We are providing actually the tools, and we are linking researchers from all over the world to the library to do research with the universities in Egypt and abroad, and the libraries.
The library is proving a big hit with researchers and visitors alike.
It's awe-inspiring. It's wonderful. Just to be in the building is a real treat. Never mind what's contained in it.
Egypt is celebrated for the advanced civilization and technology of its ancient people. Now modern Egypt is emulating the ancestors' pursuit of technology and culture. A survey conducted at New York's Skyscraper Museum found the Chrysler building is the overwhelming favourite among locals. And in a city that boasts the Empire State Building and the Statue of Liberty, that's no small title. It remains on the must-see list for the millions of tourists who flock to downtown Manhattan each year. The Chrysler building celebrated its 75th anniversary on May 27, 2005. And to mark the occasion, the co-owners of the building, Tishman Speyer Properties, provided access to the glistening steel gargoyles and winged urns on the 31st and 61st floors. The access was part of the Art Deco Society Gala, which celebrated with a week of receptions, building tours, lectures and seminars. The US Postal Service joined in the spirit of the occasion and unveiled a Chrysler building stamp as part of their Masters of Modern Architecture series.
Oh, there's so much that's exciting about the Chrysler building. It's such a New York icon. I think you'd be hard-pressed to find someone who couldn't recognize and pick the Chrysler building out of the skyline if they had to. Tishman Speyer Properties has done a great job restoring this landmark. We spent a year and a half just restoring the mural here in the lobby alone. We've done extensive restoration of the building elevators, which, as you may or may not know, are all landmarks, and each one of them is individually unique.
Visitors were also given access to the restored Art Deco lobby, the elevator doors and interiors. Commissioned by Walter P. Chrysler, the building opened its doors on May 27, 1930. The man who built his fortune on the cars which bore his name also had his personal offices in the building. He conceived the building as a family business, independent of the auto industry, and decided the city was the perfect stage for an exuberant architectural statement. William Van Allen, the architect behind the Chrysler building, was attempting to build the tallest building in New York and the world. In 1930, this race for glory among architects and developers included those involved with the building of 40 Wall Street, which was planned to finish 2 feet higher than the Chrysler building. In the most famous piece of Chrysler building folklore, Van Allen secretly constructed a 125-foot spire inside the Chrysler building and hoisted it to the top upon completion, making the Chrysler building the tallest structure in the world. However, the Chrysler building, at 1,048 feet, was only able to hold on to its title of the tallest building in the world for 1 year. In 1931, the Empire State Building, at 1,250 feet, took on that prestigious mantle. Now the Empire State Building stands at 1,453 feet, including its lightning rod. The Empire State Building might have emerged taller, but many people still consider the Chrysler building more beautiful and picturesque. The stainless steel masterpiece has seen some of its 1930s grandeur expanded, renovated and transformed into a modern 2 million square foot office centre.
The Georgian marble on the outside, the Nerostus steel that caps the top of it, the way it's illuminated in bright white lights at night that you can see all the way out at sea. The whole building just shines. It just shines right there in the middle of the New York City skyline.
The building underwent extensive renovations beginning in 1998. Preservation of the building's classic features was a high priority. The landmark facade was restored and state-of-the-art interior systems and mechanics installed. The building is now in pristine condition. For many, the Chrysler building remains not only an integral part of the New York skyline, but also an internationally recognised symbol of human accomplishment and potential. Coming up, the Cornish Tin Mine. It may be hard to compare gritty industrial remains to the imperial splendour of the Taj Mahal or the awesome magnitude of the Great Wall of China. But now, 10 disused mines in the southwest of England have been awarded the honour of World Heritage status by UNESCO.
The archaeology, industrial archaeology, is becoming a very important domain of conservation. Now we have many archaeology, especially in this country, because it was the first country for the Industrial Revolution, that signify the advancement of humanity. So this one, this site, is probably the one that was most important for the mining and production of copper and tin. So in a way, it represents an example, extraordinary example of that sector of the Industrial Revolution.
King Edward Mine in Camborne in central Cornwall is typical of many of the mine sites. It has survived almost intact and is now the oldest complete mine in Cornwall.
Cornwall led the world in mining. It led it technologically. We were producing probably in excess of half the world's copper. Then the world was a different place, of course, in 1850. Major producer of copper, and then later tin, which had been produced in smallish amounts for a long period. And by 1870, we were probably producing something like half the world's tin.
One of the reasons for that was the development of engineering technologies for hard rock mining. They enabled miners to burrow deeper underground and work more efficiently. Brooks says that many of these innovations can be attributed to the work of a young engineer by the name of Trevithick, who revolutionised the steam engine.
It was the developments of high-pressure steam by people like Trevithick and other engineers who took the basic beam engine, which is a very simple piece of kit, and turned it into what was known as the Cornish engine, which pumped all the mines here well into the 20th century and was exported around the world.
Archaeological evidence suggests that the mineral resources of Cornwall and West Devon have been exploited for over 3,500 years. But in recent decades, competition from abroad and fluctuating prices saw the industry in decline. The last of the mines closed in 1998, but they are an important reminder of the Industrial Revolution that has shaped the way we live.
Cornwall and West Devon were an incubator for the Industrial Revolution. Without the minerals, without the expertise and the population that was here, many of the things that we now take for granted would not have been able to be developed or developed so quickly. And from here, thousands, literally hundreds of thousands of people migrated around the globe. They took their skills, they took their culture with them, and as a result you have Cornish mining landscapes and the residual communities, if you like, all around the globe. That's definitely worth recognising and celebrating.
Giva Tin Mine is the largest preserved tin mining site in Europe and a centre of expertise. It was not only Cornish technology which changed the world, it was also the workers themselves.
Cornish miners and Cornish mining methods went all over the world. Today, huge numbers of people in this area have got relations in places like Australia, South Africa, and even in places like South America. I've met people working in mines who have heard of places like Giva and Levant.
These days, the area bears all the marks of a region that has done its job. The Cornish coast that was once frantic with activity has returned to the silence and beauty that was once a natural part of the landscape. Although the Cornish mines may not possess the aesthetic of the world's 7 wonders, what they produced here enabled many others to realise their visions and dreams. Landmarks can be monumental or small. This is a story about a tiny passageway that links 2 sovereign countries. Romans lovingly call the ancient passageway that links the Vatican to the medieval fortress of Castel Sant'Angelo the Passetto, or the small corridor. If the Passetto could speak, it would tell tales of mystery and intrigue, power and treachery. Constructed in 1277, this Vatican corridor was conceived in medieval times to provide a fortified, raised escape route for popes and as a strategic surveillance point to monitor activities around the Vatican. People could travel along the passageway unobserved by those down below in the street. Pope Alexander VI Borgia rushed along it in 1494 when Rome was invaded by King Charles VIII of France. In 1527, it enabled Pope Clement VII to take refuge as the Spanish Emperor Charles V pillaged the city during the sack of Rome. The arches of the passageway weave through parts of central Rome, and it is considered by residents as very much a part of their city. But it marks a solid reflection of how complex the relationship between Rome and the world's smallest city-state, the Vatican, has been through the ages.
Termina qui dove siamo noi perché questo cancello.
This gate marks the border. This part is the property of the Italian state. After the gate, it becomes the property of the Vatican State. It is abroad. It finishes in the Vatican buildings. It's only a small stretch of corridor, but from a historical rather than physical point of view, it is very long indeed. When first constructed, the passageway would have been higher than surrounding buildings. The Passetto is right inside the city, but it dominates the city to a certain degree. Now there are houses around it which are higher than the Passetto. It's very different from the past, but it is still a romantic passageway through history. The sense of history can certainly be felt, and it is not difficult to imagine popes scuttling along the battlements. During the sack of Rome in 1527, Clement VII had run down the passageway and taken refuge with 3,000 Romans in the fortress. But his escape was not problem-free, as many of his helpers were concerned that the soldiers down below would be able to see his white robes as he fled along the upper passageway.
Il passetto proprio in quell'occasione servì a Clemente VII.
The Passetto was used by Clement VII to escape the Vatican to hide, along with about 3,000 Romans, in Castel San Angelo.
Nel castello, e narrano le fonti che addirittura I cardinali e gli aiutanti del Papa coprirono.
The history books say that the cardinals and the Pope's helpers covered the Pope with a large cape in the most exposed sections of the passageway, so the marauding hordes down below couldn't see him.
Per non farlo vedere ai passanti, ai belligeranti che caoticamente affollavano le strade attorno al palazzo.
Hundreds of Romans and tourists alike now queue on a daily basis to take a walk along the passageway. It has become a major attraction, as it is also open in the evening, allowing people to avoid the high temperatures through the day. This monument is part of us. I'm really curious to see it. And the Passetto is proof that not all landmarks need to be big to capture the imagination. It's a really emotional experience, being able to see where these popes used to run from the Vatican to Castel San Angelo.